Welcome to Madang. Today's wonderful guest is Dr. Mitri Raheb, president of Dar al-kalima University, speaker and public theologian. Today he shares his newest book, The Politics of Persecution, Middle Eastern Christians in an Age of Empire. In this episode, he talks about Ottoman, British, and French empires, West Asia, persecution, resilience, white Jesus, and so much more. Please stay tuned. Please join over 3,000 people on Homebrewed Christianity's online class, Christianity in Process. This is an online pop-up learning community with Dr. John COBB and Dr. TRIPP Fuller. Make sure you read their books too. You can win a chance to get COBB's complete works, which is valued at $1,250. Please follow Homebrewed Christianity as Dr. Fuller has other amazing weekly podcasts. Join him as he celebrates 14 amazing years of podcasting and has become the most listened to theological podcast in the world. Ana Luisa crafts high-quality jewelry pieces at very affordable prices. They are carbon neutral from packaging to products. I really love this about Ana Luisa. Analuisa. Their designs are unique and will make you feel empowered, elegant, and at your finest. They have fair prices, with jewelry starting at $39, and new jewelry collections are released every Friday. Go to shop.analuisa.com/Madang, make Mom's Day, and treat her to new jewelry pieces with Ana Luisa's Buy One, Get One 40% off sale. One piece for her and one piece for you. Free shipping and returns in the U.S. I know you'll love them. The Rainbow Push Coalition is an international human and civil rights organization founded by Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr. Rainbow Push Coalition seeks to empower people through the effective use of grassroots advocacy, issue orientation, and connections between the greater community and the disenfranchised. Please join Rainbow Push and please donate. And please join the 7th annual Push Tech, which is happening on May 18 to 19, 2022. Please go to www.rainbowpush.org and please join today.
For sponsorship inquiries, please email madangpodcast@gmail.com. This is Madang, an outdoor living room for guests to share their experiences and their work. I invite you to come in and stay for a while.
Welcome to Madang. Today I have a very special guest, Dr. Mitri Raheb, who is the founder and president of Dar al-Kalima University in Bethlehem, Palestine, the most widely published Palestinian theologian to date. Raheb is the author of more than 40 books. He is widely sought after speaker all over the world. It is such a pleasure and honor to have you on Madang Podcast today to talk about your latest book, The Politics of Persecution, Middle Eastern Christians in an Age of Empire. There have been lots of great praise about your new book. Craig Barnes, the president of Princeton Theological Seminary, writes, Dr. Mitri Raheb is a pastor, university president, community developer, author, and as this volume demonstrates, he is also a compelling scholar. The book provides a historical analysis of the Palestinian church in response to the relentless political and ecclesiastical agendas in the Middle East. Philip Jenkins, the distinguished professor of history at Baylor University, writes, The Politics of Persecution offers a trove of information and analysis for any Christians fascinated by the Holy Land and its neighbors. But beyond this, it will be of great interest to general readers of all kinds, basically for anyone interested in the emergence of the modern Middle East. So thank you so much, Mitri, for coming on Madang Podcast. I know you are so busy. So thank you for making this time to come on today.
Thank you, Grace, and good to be with you. It's my pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much. The honor is all mine. I wanted to tell everyone that we met together. I met you for the first time in Korea. We were both invited to be speakers at the Council of World Mission, and it was held on Jeju Island. And I must say, when you spoke, you stirred me so much. You were one of the best speakers I've ever heard in my life. So it's a great honor today to have you on my podcast, Madang.
Thank you, Grace. For me, I look up to you and to all the work you are doing. It's really good.
Oh, you are too kind. You're the one who's doing so much great work. So we met there, and we've met each other at AAR many times. And you and I both live in Bethlehem. So I'm in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and I feel like you're my twin, and you live all the way across the world in the real Bethlehem.
The real Bethlehem.
Yeah, the real Bethlehem. So I've always wanted to go, and I've lost many opportunities. And I hope you will hold your conference. Well, I will finally get to go, to Bethlehem and see you there. It's my dream as a theologian to be in Bethlehem. So let's pray that will happen.
I hope it will happen next year.
Okay, so let's cross our fingers. So before we get into your fabulous and important work, what have you been doing lately? I know you've been traveling and so forth. So can you just share with our listeners what you have been doing lately?
Actually, I just came back from the US 2 days ago after spending there 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
I toured 10 states.
Oh, my goodness.
Within these 3 weeks, from the East Coast to the West Coast, advocating for the liberation of Palestine, introducing my new book, but also we have a support organization also in the States called Bright Stars of Bethlehem, and we had our board meeting in Atlanta. It has been very busy days, and actually I'm leaving again after tomorrow. After being for 2 years locked down, it seems like now everyone wants to do their board meetings and their conferences. And so this year is going to be really crazy.
Oh, wow. That's amazing because you are traveling so much. You are the president of the school and you have written over 40 books. I don't know how you do it. You are like a role model for so many of us. So thank you, because all your work is so important. Do you have a copy of the book that you can hold up so people can see it? The Politics of Persecution.
Yes, this is my latest book.
It is so amazing. Yeah. I hope everyone will get it. It's published by Baylor Press. Is it Baylor University Press?
Correct.
And yes, such an important book, because when you spoke in Korea, I felt like so much of that material is so important. And I felt some of it actually came into your book here in the Politics of Persecution. So can you share with us today what led you to write this very, very important book?
Yeah. The topic of persecution of Christians in the Middle East became like widely spread, I would say, since the mid-90s. So in the last 25 years. And I started asking myself why. And the perception is that the Christians in the Arab world are persecuted by Muslims. That's the perception. And what I'm saying is that this perception actually says more about the West than about the Christians in the region. This is the first thesis, basically, that I talk about. The second thesis is that, the West that pretend to care for the Christians in the region was most of the time actually the force that led to abandoned the Christians here. And I show so many cases where this is really the case. And the third thesis is that this idea actually became more important under the Trump administration, and I explain why.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, because I'm glad those events kind of led you to write this Politics of Persecution. And in the book, you kind of went into depth about the term Middle East, because I find that so important. I find language is so important. And we as theologians, language is all that we have. So the specific words that we use to address issues are so important. And then you didn't like that term, but you ended up putting it in your subtitle. So can you explain to us this term and what led you to include it in the subtitle?
Right. Actually, the subtitle is really interesting because it talks about Middle Eastern Christians. So you are right. I don't like the term Middle East because it's middle of where and east of what. I mean, if you live in Philadelphia or in the Midwest, I mean, our region is neither middle nor west of you, right? Mm-hmm. Nor east of you. So why this term? This term actually was coined in the 19th century by the British Empire, and the idea actually was, they wanted to distinguish this region from the Far East. Okay, so they called it the Middle East, which is like, it's east of Europe, but it is not as far as the Far East, so they call it the Middle East. But so it's an imperial actually term, and it was a term actually meant to control the region. Mm-hmm. Today we call it West Asia and North Africa, our region. When I go to, say, to Korea or to China, mm-hmm. I always like to make the point that Jesus was an Asian. Yeah. Because he was West Asian. Okay, because Palestine is West Asia. And people don't get that, but this is what it is.
Well, I'm glad you brought it into the book and in your other works, and you're talking about it, because I think naming is power. And we have given the power of the empire to always name us and where you are. So I'm so glad that you're bringing it up, because naming is so important. I think you kind of renaming it West Asia is such an important term. I think it opens up our mind, and I think it gives agency to those who name for themselves. I hope you will continue to do that and go against empire and imperialism, because that has been such a big problem for people like you and I, living in the margins of society. I think we should be able to name ourselves. And I think, Edward Said, when he wrote about Orientalism, the West kind of orientalizing us and making us so inferior, I think that, it speaks volumes. And I hope people in the West, in the Western Hemisphere, will read more books like from Edward Said and from you, because we need to know what the problems have been caused by the Western world, and the renaming and re-identifying different parts of the world is so crucial. So you brought in also Jesus, and in your book, Jesus was born in Bethlehem. So why, he is this Asian. So why is it that the Western world, Western Christianity, have made him so white? Can you explain for us? And you do mention it in the book too.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, it was actually weaponizing the Bible by having Jesus as the white, actually that came to save the white in the first place, and then later the poor people that the white wanted to control, and even the image of Jesus, as almost as the emperor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this resemblance, while actually I wrote about it in another book. When Palestinian wants to find one symbol that would tell our story as Palestinian best, they cannot find better than the cross. It is Jesus that was crushed on the cross by the empire. This is where our people find actually their hope and the source of their inspiration. Not the cross as not Jesus as the victim, but Jesus as the liberator that stood up to the empire and had to pay the price, but at the same time was able to transform the empire into something we call the kingdom or the reign of God.
Wow. So I find it very interesting that you point out that white Christianity have made him into this emperor. Even the artists have done that in paintings and sculptures and stained glass window. And we in the West, because we're so accustomed to seeing that, we accept it. But marginalized people have been pointing out that Jesus is not white. So how do we work towards ridding ourselves of this white Christianity and white Jesus? Can you help us in a way? Because he is this Asian figure born in Bethlehem, Palestine, and we made him into this white emperor. So how do we get rid of this?
Right. I mean, Grace, let me tell you this. I mean, I was a pastor at Christmas Lutheran Church in Bethlehem, Palestine for 30 years. This church was built by German missionaries. And it has beautiful stained glass window. But if you look at these stained glass windows, you think Jesus was Scandinavian, with his blonde hair and blue eyes. I mean, and you ask yourself, I mean, why in the world would, German, artist put in Bethlehem, where it all started, I mean, where the real story started, put something like that, and so for me, actually, when I came back from Germany, the first thing I started really doing was to develop Palestinian contextual theology. Which I think this is important because in contextual theology, we try really to say who we are and what Jesus means for us in our context. But then I noticed that actually the real challenge is to develop contextual art. And this is why I ended up actually starting a brand new university that focus on arts and culture. So we don't teach theology. I'm theologian by heart, but we chose actually art as the tool for social transformation, because this is where the icons are made, modern icons for people, and this is where we can actually transform the symbols of a culture that so often was predominantly Western and white.
Yeah, that's why I love following you on social media. I think everyone should follow you to see what your university is doing, because those images actually impact how we view. And, social media, all this cultural aspects. And I find it so interesting that you said the Scandinavian, they came to Bethlehem where it all started, and they are trying to convert. And in your book, you also say in Palestine, Christians are indigenous. Christians are indigenous. And I think Western people need to hear that over and over again. Christians are indigenous, so why don't the West ever see this or understand it? And it's so interesting that you were pastoring and that church was built by the white Europeans and they made Jesus so white. So why are we having such a hard time in the West? And then also the West impacted different parts of the world like Africa, South America, and Asia, East Asia, and they brought the white Jesus into all these different parts of the world. How do we unpack this? Your book deals with it. That's why it's so important that the West read your work and follow you and see the artwork that your university is doing. So what do we do with this big problem?
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's really important to see that there is a problem. And I tell you, it's not only, this one problem. As Palestinians, we have another problem, which is in theology, in art, in culture, in the dominant discourse. Palestinians were made like, terrorist, troublemaker, savage, and the Israeli were made like, the crown of creation almost, and they forgot actually that Israel is actually empire by proxy. And what they do in Palestine is settler colonialism. Something similar to what the whites did in South Africa or in Australia or in North America to the native people, to the indigenous people. And so we have to fight on that front as well as Palestinians and as Christians. So to be aware of the bias, there was a time when we in the South were looking up to the North, thinking that, salvation will come from there. I think we realize now that this is not the case, So we need to realize the bias. I mean, now, even when I listen to the news, say, of the Ukraine, the war in the Ukraine, irrespective if I listen to US media, to German media, to Russian media, all of it is propaganda.
Is propaganda?
Propaganda, the real story is not told. There are no critical voices anymore that really tell the story. So you see German media, there are making, the Ukrainian president almost as a saint. I was looking how they were demonizing, other Arab leaders in the region. And you can see, how, it's black and white. And really the truth is the victim in this whole thing. So we need critical minds to critique, these ideas that the empire keep producing, and they bombard us with it day and night, that we don't have time to think, is it really true or not? So critiquing is really important, and then we need to develop our own narrative. This is so important, what is really our narrative as Korean? What is our narrative as Palestinians? What is our narrative, as Asian, as Africans, as African American? I mean, it is so important that we give a platform for these voices to be amplified. I think this is what you are doing with your podcast as well.
No, thank you so much. So as you're talking about empire building, in your book, you also talk about the Ottoman Empire, which was the largest entity in the world in the 16th century. And you have a lot of good statistics in the book. And it was interesting. You said there were only 7% who were Christians under the empire, Ottoman Empire, but then it grew from 7 to 23%. I found that astounding. So can you explain to us why that happened? And so how do these empires work? And explain a little bit to us today.
Yeah, I mean, I look in the book, really, the book is a book of church history, if you want. Mm-hmm. It talks about the history of Christians in our region, North Africa, West Asia, in the last 200 years. And I start really with the Ottoman Empire. And the point I make there with the statistic is that the number of Christians and the percentage of Christians grew under Ottoman Islamic rule more than under Christian rule. And I think nobody in the West really realized that. In the book, I have a chapter about for example, the British Empire. If you look, the British Empire brought two major sins into our world. First, the sectarianism. I mean, they divided India from Pakistan along sectarian lines. They introduced the rigid apartheid system in South Africa. In the same year, 1948, everything happened along racial lines. They came to Palestine and they declared Palestine a Jewish homeland. Though the Jews were only 5% of the population, the Christians were more than the Jews, and Muslims were the majority, but they ignored the Muslims, they ignored the Christians, and they declared Palestine a Jewish homeland, again, along sectarian lines. And they did not do that actually because they loved the Jews, but they were afraid that the Russian Jews might invade England because of the pogroms that were happening in Russia. And so they wanted to divert, these Jewish migrants, instead of coming to England, to tell them, no, you don't belong here to Europe, you belong to Palestine. And they created for us a problem that still we are paying the price of it until today. Here I would like also to mention the role that theology, especially Christian Zionism, actually played in supporting the empire, in this case, the British Empire. Or if you see, how actually it was the evangelical Christian or the Christian right in the States who keep supporting actually Israel today. And so you can see how Christianity actually is damaging the local Christianity here in our region.
Yeah. You just shared a wealth of information and from this critical lens that the West is not used to and exposed to. So thank you so much. So your book is about persecution, and I find that very interesting. You talked about the persecution of Christians in the Middle East, which has been an occurring theme since the middle to the 19th century. And the topic, you mentioned earlier too, there was a resurgence under the Trump presidency. I just find that so interesting. So in Lebanon, 20,000 Christians were killed. British media said that Christians were victims, but Christians started the whole thing. So that also is very interesting. So please explain to us, where we are getting these wrong ideas and sharing the wrong ideas. what are we supposed to do as Christians in the West and around the world? Because, Madang is not just listened to by Americans, but around the world. What are we supposed to do about this persecution? And you talked about before the persecution about, smuggling Bibles and so forth, but it's all different. So explain in detail what the persecution, how it happens, and what are we supposed to be doing?
Yeah, as I said, the theme of persecution says more about the West than about us.
Yeah.
And this theme became important actually in the beginning of the 90s of the last century. So 1991, the Christian leaders came together in the Lausanne movement. And they saw that the Soviet Union was actually not anymore the threat. It was, dissolving, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that was like their main focus for decades, smuggling Bible into Russia, and helping the persecuted church there. Now, suddenly, when the Iron Wall fell down, this wasn't anymore a theme.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1991, at the Lausanne second meeting, the leaders, it was actually an Argentinian born Christian that said, now we have actually to focus not anymore on Russia, but on what he called the resistant belt. This is the belt that starts in North Africa and goes all the way to China. But this is where actually 90% of the Muslims live. And so the enemy became not anymore Russia. Now again, the Russia as the enemy is coming back again.
Yeah.
But from 91 until now, it was really Islam. And this Islamophobia actually meant not only it wasn't only against the Muslims, but it was meant as a tool for internal politics, for people to mobilize the base against one enemy. That was really an important reason. But also it was used by Israel because they were propagating themselves as they are the protector of Christians, which is not true. Mm-hmm. So all of these factors actually came together to create this idea that Christians are persecuted by Muslims. And this is what I'm saying in the book is, if we were to find one term that best tell the story of Arab Christianity, is not persecution, but resilience.
Mm.
This is the key word in the book, it's resilience, which means the Christians here in the region, with all the ups and downs of history by empires, we had the Ottoman Empire, we had the British Empire, we had the French Empire, if you want, and now we have the American Empire and the Russian Empire under Putin, So 5 empires just in the last 200 years. And actually, Christians were actually, none of those Christian empires really was interested in the Christians. They used the Christians for their own political ends when that suited them. When it didn't suit them, they sacrificed them on the altar of their political interest. I give an example, the Armenian genocide. 1.5 million people, Armenian and Assyrians, were killed, massacred by the Turks between 1880 to 1918. And the Germans were actually allies of the Turks, and they knew exactly of this genocide.
Mhm.
And what is striking is that the Emperor of Germany, William II, was also the head of the church in Germany. And yet he ordered his generals not to interfere, because that will actually, it might affect German interest in Turkey, and German interests are more important than the 1.5 million Armenians and Assyrians. So imagine if the head of the church tells his generals, close your eyes when you see 1.5 million. So this is what I'm saying, that we are used and sacrificed on the altar of interest. So I don't believe that any empire really is interested in us, but they use us.
It's so heartbreaking to hear you as a Christian theologian from that area. In the book, you talked about the empire, and then you said how the British and the French dismantled the Ottoman Empire, and then they constructed Lebanon in 1920, and Lebanon became a republic in 1926, and then independent in 1943. From 1919, we hear the issue of minority. It was an issue for the UN. It was a protected minorities. I just find this so interesting, and then how you tie that in with, protection, resilience, empire, and persecution. Like, why is everyone meddling with the issues in your region? Like, why are we so interested?
The reason was certainly oil, one, but second, because our region controlled 3 of the major water highways, and this is important for economy, for transport, and I think these are 2 major regions actually for the empires that they were interested always in our region. So it's really it's the resources and the geopolitics that made them to be interested in, not the people. So it's not the people, and definitely not the Christians. This is what I'm trying to say. And yeah, they came up with the idea of minority majority. Yeah. So they wanted basically to use minorities to interfere in the politics of the region. You have really to you don't know if you want to laugh or cry, when Vice President Pence say, we need to help the persecuted Christians in Iraq. So he designated $50 million to help the poor Christians. But you know what? In 2003, when the US invaded Iraq, 1 million Christians left Iraq. Because, if you destroy the infrastructure, if you dismantle an army, imagine in the States, somebody will come and dismantle the US army. And so you have chaos, right? Mm-hmm. And so who would like to live there? So they don't talk about, that the US politics led to the displacement and migration of 1 million Christians from Iraq. And they want to help with $50 million, the poor Christians that were left there. They should not have destroyed the country in the first place. Today when I think of Ukraine, the poor people there, I keep seeing in the media how they try always, to tell them, keep on. Their country is destroyed. 4 million Ukrainians are now refugees, it's such a sad story, but who's benefiting? Not the Ukrainian people. It's the empires, mm-hmm. Both empires.
Yeah. It's so sad. I'm so glad that you can explain the Ukrainian crisis right now. It just breaks my heart when empires come in. And in your book, you also mentioned that, until 1923, me Jerusalem had only one municipality, but the British came and Jerusalem has 4 quarters. And this is a British invention. To me, because I've not visited that area and I'm hoping to go one day, I've had several times when I could have gone. Actually, about 5 years ago, I was with the WCC working group and we had a meeting there, and then they were detaining all of our members. So I was sitting at Newark Airport and they told me to just go back home. So I missed an opportunity. But I just find this so interesting how these empires come in and they just disrupt, life. So explain that municipality, because I just find that so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, indeed, but this is part of this, what I said, the sectarianization. So the British came and there was one municipality in Jerusalem. There were Christian Jews and Muslims, Arabs, and Jews, running the city together. The British decided, no, we have to divide the city along sectarian lines. So they created in East Jerusalem an Arab municipality with Christians and Muslims, and in West Jerusalem, a Jewish municipality. To see how absurd this is. 1947, we had 1 hospital for lepers in Palestine, in Jerusalem. We had lepers that we hear about in the Bible. We had them until 1970 in Palestine. The last were eradicated, and even there were Christian Jews and Muslim lepers together. They have something in common. Mm-hmm. The British came and said it is not good for lepers to be together. So they divided the lepers along sectarian lines. So they sent the Jewish lepers to West Jerusalem, and they sent the Arab lepers to East Jerusalem. The same thing they did with, you see how sick, because it's divide and rule, you divide the people. And so they start, creating different identities. And then the neighbors become enemies. And then you can control that. And I mean, if we look at Korea, I mean, how the one people was divided, who's benefiting from that? I mean, it's really not the people of Korea. I mean, I was there in Korea 1990. We were crying when we saw how the young people were dancing, hoping for a unifying country, that families will come together again and so on. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's the empires that use us.
Yeah, the empire broke up Korea. So thank you for bringing that up. The evil of empire we must name, and we should try to dismantle the evil empire, because Korea has been divided and we Koreans want to reunite, and it's becoming almost impossible. So we are the only divided country in the world. So thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for your work. I would love to talk with you all day long, because you are just carrying this wealth of information, statistics, and analysis, critical lens. So thank you. Just one last question. You did talk about resilience. And so I want to hear more about resilience, because you say that you don't want to talk about persecution, but talk about resilience. You talk about diversity. I just find all these terms so important, with that we become agents of change. How do we become agents of change? And actually, before you even get into that, I also want to thank you for writing the foreword for my book, Hope in Disarray, because in that foreword, you also talk about how we become agents of change, and hope is, this kind of foundation for Christians. So I just am so grateful for, you writing the foreword for Hope in Disarray. And I find a lot of hope in your book, in your latest book. So say a bit about resilience rather than persecution, and how we become agents of change and change so that we become a better society, equality, pluralism. I just find these terms that you talk about over and over again in your book are so important for us wherever we live, because we are living with marginality and losing our identity, and people are saying, oh, we can't have pluralism, et cetera, et cetera. So your book is dealing with all these issues. So please say more about them.
Yeah, I think if we look at the history of the Christians here in the region, how they really were engaged in liberating their people from empires.
Yeah.
Ottoman Empire, British Empire, French Empire, all empires. So this is one. Secondly, if you see how the Christians, though small in numbers, are actually running, like we did in Palestine, a study just recently, and we found out that Christians, though they are less than 2% of the population, they run 1/3 of the health services in the country. This is the story of resilience.
That's
if you
amazing.
if you see how Christian thinkers were fighting this sectarian identities and really trying to bring civility into the discussion, that at the end of the day, Christians and Muslims, and even Christians and Muslims and Jews, have lived together for so long, and they can still live together in the future. And we have to fight this sectarian identity that the empire is promoting. So Christians were engaged in that. So if you see what the Christians were actually always trying to bring something, constructive to the table, and not to give up. Even when everything seems to be falling apart, Christians were continuing the journey and saying, no, we will not immigrate. We will be here because we are needed here, because we have a role to do here and to play here. So this is really a story of resilience that we need to celebrate. And in this special time where we have this populism threatening us everywhere, it is really important to celebrate these voices and these people that keep resilience. It's amazing, and so we need to celebrate that.
Oh, thank you so much. That's a great way to end the podcast. I am so grateful for all your work. You are so busy as a writer, as the founder and president of the university, and you travel and speak so much. I don't know how you've written so many books. Give us a clue of what you're working on now before we say goodbye to everybody. What are you working on next?
Actually, I have 2 books
coming out soon.
But there is one that I would like to mention maybe here.
Yes,
which
sure.
Is, it will come with Orbis Press in the US, and it's the working title is Decolonizing Palestine.
Oh, that sounds like a fabulous book.
It's going to be really a very, very interesting and challenging book for many, and especially for theologians, because I try to critique how the theology has been dealing with Palestine for a long time.
You know what? We need to read that book today, because we have it all wrong in the West. So I can't wait for your book to come out. I think that's so interesting. So anyway, before that comes out, everyone should read The Politics of Persecution, Middle Eastern Christians in an Age of Empire, published by Baylor University. University Press. Please read that book before the other one comes out, Decolonizing Palestine by Orbis Books. And follow Dr. Mitri Raheb on social media and what his university does. I think your work is so important. I can talk with you all day long, but I know you have to finish off these other books that you're writing, and you'll be traveling more. Safe journey and all that you do. Stay well and healthy. You know, we are still in the pandemic. So thank you so much for spending so much time with me on Madang podcast. Your book is important. Your work is important. And I hope everyone goes out and buys not just this book, but all your other 40 books that you've written. And I know you collaborate with McGill de la Torre and with other scholars and theologians in the West and East. So maybe you and I can do a book in the future too. So thank you so much for being a guest. It was such a pleasure and honor to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Grace, thank you very much. Also, I was really glad to be here, guest on your podcast. Hope to see you in November at AR, where they are going to discuss my book. Actually, there is a panel on my book there, and hopefully next year in Bethlehem.
Yes, not my Bethlehem, but I will see you in your Bethlehem, the real Bethlehem.
The real Bethlehem.
The real Bethlehem. I just live in a fake one here in the US. But I will see you. And if I do go to AR, I've been going for the last so many years, last 21 years ongoing. I was debating whether to go or not, but if your book is there and if I go, I will be definitely there at your book panel. Thank you so much for all your work. It's such a pleasure to see you virtually, because my listeners, you know, they listen on the podcast stream and also on YouTube and Facebook. It's such a pleasure to see you on here, and I hope to see you in person either this November or next summer. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Grace.
Please join over 3,000 people on Homebrewed Christianity's online class, Christianity in Process. This is an online pop-up learning community with Dr. John COBB and Dr. TRIPP Fuller. Make sure you read their books too. You can win a chance to get COBB's complete works, which is valued at $1,250. Please follow Homebrewed Christianity as Dr. Fuller has other amazing weekly podcasts. Join him as he celebrates 14 amazing years of podcasting and has become the most listened to theological podcast in the world. Ana Luisa crafts high-quality jewelry pieces at very affordable prices. They are carbon neutral from packaging to products. I really love this about Ana Luisa. ANALUISA. Their designs are unique and will make you feel empowered, elegant, and at your finest. They have fair prices with jewelry starting at $39, and new jewelry collections are released every Friday. Go to shop.analuisa.com/Madang, make Mom's Day, and treat her to new jewelry pieces with Ana Luisa's buy one, get one 40% off sale. One piece for her and one piece for you. Free shipping and returns in the U.S. I know you'll love them. The Rainbow Push Coalition is an international human and civil rights organization founded by Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr. Rainbow Push Coalition seeks to empower people through the effective use of grassroots advocacy, issue orientation, and connections between the greater community and the disenfranchised. Please join Rainbow Push and please donate. And please join the 7th annual Push Tech, which is happening on May 18 to 19, 2022. Please go to www.rainbowpush.org and please join today.
Show your support and please order Invisible, available wherever books are sold. For sponsorship inquiries, please email madangpodcast.gmail.com.